Говорят, тварь вернулась в город. Будет крупная операция против нее.
Бомбу ядерную, что ли, кинут? Не нравится мне все это. Валить из Москвы надо, а мы тут трупы всякие таскаем.
Я не труп, я живой!
Ой, черт!
Ишь ты, говорит. А выглядит, будто пришельцы его сожрали, да и вынесли.
Заткнитесь вы, оба!
Funny thing about Slavjank games. Once you've beaten one of them, another one appears in your orbit, and you gotta have your next fix. Sure enough, just when I solved that problem with Collapse, I got caught up with They're Alive. And just when I struggled through with They're Alive, I learned about MorphX. The problem with Slavjank games is that it can be a crapshoot whether they're localized for an English-speaking audience. Some games just don't make it overseas and are inaccessible if you can't understand the original spoken or written language. MorphX is a weird case because it did in fact make it overseas, but only as an Xbox 360 port. I don't have a 360 anymore, so that option was off the table. There is a PC port available, but it's not officially localized for the English language. Key word. Officially. When I found MorphX listed on my Abandonware's new releases, there were two versions available for download. A straight rip of the PC port, which requires a CD key that cannot be acquired digitally, as the game is no longer available on digital shelves, and a fan-made ISO version that has subtitles for the FMV sequences, and mostly translated dialogue and menus. You want that second version. Looking up background info on the game, this version was made with the involvement of someone named Keith Duffy. He's a very important figure when it comes to playing Slavjank games, as he's played and covered several of them in his WordPress Keith's Crappy Video Game blog. I first heard of Mr. Duffy through a Tehsnakerer video on the game Neuro. In his review, Snake said that Duffy went out of his way to learn Russian so he could translate the game letter by letter and provide that version for other like-minded individuals who wanted to experience Neuro. He did the same with MorphX, and there are forum posts out there documenting the process he and a friend went through to make this version of the game accessible to a Western audience. Thank you, Snake, and thank you, Mr. Duffy. Please check out both of their respective channels. Snake does fantastic long-form reviews that have a ton of substance and clever wordplay, and Mr. Duffy is a trailblazer when it comes to talking about charmingly busted games. Literally 5 of the games I've covered in this channel have appeared on the list in his blog. So what is MorphX? MorphX, or The Swarm as it's known in Europe, is a 2008 character action game / third-person shooter developed by Targum Games and published by Bout Entertainment, the same company that published Collapse, so we're in good company here. A lot of Slavjank games tend to be derivative of more popular works. Infernal Crib from Resident Evil 4, They're Alive Crib from They Live, and Made Man, a game I'm currently playing but probably won't cover, is effectively a Max Payne clone with rudimentary cover mechanics. No, seriously, it moves like Max Payne and even has sound effects lifted from those games. It would be reductive, but not outright inaccurate to label MorphX as Russian prototype. Different versions of the game's box art hint at what the protagonist will look like later in the campaign, but this one's the best because it's an outright lie, and because it reminds me of this. You play as an unnamed civilian caught in the middle of an alien invasion. As far as I know, he has no name, so we'll just go with...
Hello-ski, I am, how you say, Russian Guyovich.
I've called Desmond Pierce from Devil's Hunt the most milquetoast looking character who's ever appeared on my channel, and I gotta say that guy may have pushed him off his throne. He looks like he'd be something you'd buy off the Unity Asset Store. Anyways, Guy here wakes up after falling out of what looks like some kind of cocoon, into which the aliens placed him and a few other humans. At the start, Guy can only do one action, which is to kick, and that's mapped to both primary and secondary attack. As we make our way a little further on, the game informs us about melee weapons and provides Guy with a wrench to break through the wooden planks. The game doesn't tell you which key is mapped to perform a given action in the tutorial messages, so it's best to jump into the menu at the start and remap a few keys to make the experience a lot better. I advise swapping out right mouse button for aiming down sights and secondary attack to a key adjacent to WASD, as it's not that useful as the game progresses. I gotta say, I really like the movement in MorphX. In a passing thoughts for Collapse, I said that you can tell whether a game was designed with keyboard or controller in mind, based on movement, and MorphX's PC port feels good with a keyboard and mouse. This is exactly the kind of walking and turning speed I expect from a third-person shooter, so props to Targum for locking the movement down. Yes, very scary game. Ugh, what the hell is that? This opening area teaches you about basic movement, picking up weapons, using medkits, and interacting with objects in the world. I didn't know it at first, but having one of the first things with which to interact in the game be a valve controlling steam would be surprisingly appropriate for this game. Look at this charming fellow. Guess he tried to skip the tutorial and paid for it. Kinda weird how the game already provides a replacement for the wrench here with a lead pipe before we're even able to get into combat. I keep getting distracted with kicking this spider thing in this segment and always miss out that this game is trying to catch my attention with this rolling barrel, as if it wants to brag about how it implemented physics. Like it was some other game. Yeah, this game looks like it was made in Russia. No disrespect to Russian game devs, but they do tend to have an aesthetic when it comes to their settings. I love this bit. It's so cute to see something like this in 2021. Going around the corner leads us to a live specimen, and we finally get to test out combat. It's nothing special. Go Unga until the enemy is dead. This basic enemy is called an Explorer, and it likes to flash us with a blinding light to distract us as it attacks with big meaty swings. These guys can be little shits because they'll do the solar flare attack, swing a couple of times, and then run off after they've taken too many injuries, so you have to chase them down and finish the fight. These spider enemies are called detectors, but for the sake of convenience, we're calling them head crabs. These are the real bastards of the game. They'll pounce on you and explode, and their explosions will cause damage. You'll be using kicks on them the most in the early game. Collision can be wonky in MorphX, so you'll want to spam kicks so that the head crabs connect with your boot and go flying. After a bit of exploring, we come upon a new enemy type. The game is pretty inconsistent with what to call this unit. The gallery calls them overseers, but when you kill enemies later on in the campaign, you can read the names of enemy units after you've killed them, and I've seen them labeled as surgeons. Granted, we're playing the game with a fan translation, so the original term might go both ways.
He said they go both ways.
Like a bisexual.
Thank you, Ted. That was the joke.
Anyways, after killing this enemy, it looks like we absorbed his corpse. Dunno how that happened, but our dude does not take well to the process and passes out. Some soldiers arrive and assume Guy is another corpse to add to the pile and drag him back to their temporary base.
Говорят, тварь вернулась в город. Будет крупная операция против нее.
Бомбу ядерную, что ли, кинут? Не нравится мне все это. Валить из Москвы надо, а мы тут трупы всякие таскаем.
Я не труп, я живой!
Ай, черт!
Ишь ты, говорит. А выглядит, будто пришельцы его сожрали, да и выслали.
Заткнитесь вы, оба!
I think this is the scene that made me fall in love with the game. The unintentional comedy that comes from the over-exaggerated animations. The framing of this wide shot to allow for the door to whip open and the guy behind to cut in like a sitcom entrance. All of this is just mwah. Guy still seems to be experiencing some effects after absorbing that one alien, as he says he's burning up, which I guess justifies why he'd be running around in a tank top for the rest of the game, despite being set in Russia. I assume it's always freezing cold out there, but I'm from Florida, and anything above 65 degrees turns me into Jack Torrance at the end of The Shining.
Мы нашли инкубатор. Тут вся предыдущая группа полегла. Вижу заготовки инфильтраторов. Приступаем к зачистке. Запасную ячейку. Похоже, один недавно вырвался. Черт. А этот, которого мы нашли? Как слышишь меня? Проверь своего клиента, быстро!
Черт, да это же мутант!
Guess we're not welcome with the soldiers anymore. I was worried that guy would easily get mowed down by AK fire here if we weren't fast enough to dispatch this dude. But the game seems to be nice about easing the player into combat in the early game. After we pick up the soldier, we can finally get ranged weapons. Listen to the sound this game makes when you pick up guns. Sound familiar?
Catch! Good.
It's the exact same sound. Remember when I said that Slavjank games tend to grip from more popular titles? The valve turning, the rolling barrel, the conceit of a guy being caught in the middle of a fight between soldiers and aliens. You're having a flashback moment, like in the end of thrillers when all the pieces of the plot come together to reveal a twist in the end right now, aren't you? The rest of this chapter involves breaking out of the underground mall by running to various parts of the map to activate switches that open doors to progress. We'll have to fight man and monster alike, and when it comes to combat, MorphX squeezes by with a passing grade, just like it did with basic movement. You can swap between a melee weapon or a ranged weapon. Ranged weapons are either AK-74s or shotguns. The shotgun isn't bad per se, but ammo is scarce and most enemies will be using AKs, so stick with the rifle for the entire game. You can also pick up grenades, which are really good if you can catch a few guys with them. This game has great jibs. After absorbing the one alien, Guy has acquired a few new abilities in a progression system. When you go into the menu, you'll see a character screen showing you all of the available abilities and the keys to which they're mapped. If you select an ability, the menu goes to its respective progression screen. This is the meat and potatoes of the game. Each ability's progression screen has a map of hex cells containing red and green nodes. Connecting nodes together increases the efficacy of a given ability, and the progression screen tells you what each type of node provides. Connecting all of the green nodes for an active ability will make it more energy efficient when it's activated. Connecting all of the red nodes for the first passive ability increases the length of the health meter. As you progress in the game, you'll come upon biomasses you can access, which can provide various resources, such as health, energy, and gene nodes. Health and energy nodes are restoratives, but gene nodes are used to connect the red and green nodes together. How you build connections will affect the coloring of the connection. If all of the red nodes are connected to the same link, the connection will be red, and vice versa for green nodes. But if the connection is mixed between red and green, then it will be colored bright yellow. I am not sure if the type of connection affects efficacy of the upgrades, but in general, you want to make sure that you've connected all the dots for a given ability. There are secret biomasses hidden throughout the game that provide you with mystery nodes. Think of them as wildcards that will give you a random gene node. Because of the hex cell layout, you'll learn to appreciate having a variety of different connection types as you develop your networks. It's a cool progression feature, and it's a lot more elaborate than the console port, which simplifies the tile spaces. You can spend a good deal of time trying to optimize your networks to get the most out of your connections, so that you can reallocate gene nodes for other abilities. This is cool and all, but the most important upgrade in the game is found in the upper levels of the underground mall.
Bury the light deep within. Cast aside, there's no coming home. We're burning chaos in the wind, drifting in the ocean alive.
Now realistically, this should be the worst melee weapon in the game. This is effectively a mall katana. The blade should chip as soon as we swing on something slightly tougher than a sheet of paper. But thankfully, this sword makes quick work out of basic enemies. The escape sequence for the level can be disorienting because of all the double backing and switch hunting in this section. It also doesn't help that the enemies seem to randomly spawn in at various points. I said that the game was nice in the early section when it came to combat, but if you're not quick on the draw when it comes to finding out who's shooting where, you won't make it out of the mall. That's where remapping ADS to right mouse button pays off. Along with recovering health from the various nodes scattered about the map, we can also absorb alien corpses to regain health and energy. The amount recovered can change based on the connections made in the symbiosis screen. This is where the game feels a bit like Prototype. Absorbing an explorer unlocks a new ability, Alien View. It's detective vision. This can actually be really handy in the early sections because it highlights all the enemies in the game and helps them stick out from the level, which makes it easier to pick them out when they're spawning in from random spots because they blend in so easily with the drab environments. It's kind of like the effect that Nectar provides in Haze, but in a better game. Also, explorers can disorient you with their solar flare tech if you have Alien View on. The chapter ends with Guy sneaking up on a soldier to learn the whereabouts of the hospital, and he's aching to get some medicine and find a cure for his new condition.
До госпиталя было довольно недалеко. В мирное время пара часов ходу. Но то, с чем пришлось столкнуться на улицах, внесло существенные коррективы в мой начальный план.
Тварь идет! Огонь! Огонь! Тварь идет!
This line is definitely the product of Russian humor. The second chapter of the game starts with a chase set piece featuring this chunky boy, which everyone refers to as the Beast. I'm not sure if there's any connections to Infamous with that name. This is a pretty straightforward chapter, and it's cool to see this kind of game feature set pieces that I'd expect from a contemporary Western game. You can really tell that Targame was a team of very talented people. Considering the kinds of games I've played, maybe my standards have been lowered so much that seeing a game script several actors in a single area is enough to impress me. Midway through this set piece, the game introduces a new enemy type, the Persecutor. These biomechanical panthers are hyper-aggressive, which is reflected in the ability they unlock when absorbed, Rage. Rage is MorphX's answer to Double Trigger. Guy's damage output and defenses are heightened, and he can rush enemies down with sheer brute force. You'll know if an enemy dies to rage because the game goes into slow motion as a flourish. Here's the thing about rage that makes it better than most superform abilities in other action games. You can toggle it on at any point so long as you have the energy for it. That's more or less how it works in the Devil May Cry games. You need at least 3 charges to activate Devil Trigger, but you can bank your charges for as long as you want and activate it to use up the entire meter or deactivate it and save the meter for later uses. Most action games, including Platinum titles that aren't Metal Gear Rising, usually require full meter before going into sicko mode. That tends to cause a player to become stingier with the meter if they know that it'll take a while to build it back up, and that activating it will use up the entire meter. Connecting the red nodes in Rage's network increases the amount of health recovered with every melee attack in Rage mode. It's one of the best mechanics in the game. However, there is a caveat when it comes to attacking near corpses. Hit a corpse too many times and it'll jib, preventing Guy from absorbing the corpse. Attacking in Rage mode decreases the number of hits it takes to jib a corpse, so be careful near bodies when you see the game go into slow motion, and consider repositioning before continuing the combo. The chapter ends with a boss fight with the beast. I had to take a break at this point and look up a guide, because this boss has some feedback issues. The intended loop is to chuck grenades at the boss until it goes into a stun state, jump into the AA gun emplacement, and fire into the boss to chip its health away until it recovers, and jump out of the AA gun before the boss can hit you with its claw. Rinse and repeat. The thing is, this boss is chufty. This fight feels like it takes way longer to do than necessary, and this caused me to doubt whether I was fighting the boss the right way. It doesn't help that it's really easy for the boss to wipe out most of Guy's health with a few claw strikes and fireballs. Anyways, fight the boss and make sure to access the secret biomass before finishing it. Otherwise, the chapter ends and you'll miss out on those sweet gene nodes. The end of this chapter shows that the game really likes to rely on the cliche of the main character blacking out in order to progress the plot. When I streamed this game to my friends on Discord, my fellow content creator Vanis pointed out that Guy seemed to look bigger than he did at the start of the game. He wasn't wrong. Guy is definitely bulking up, and his left hand seems to be turning into a claw now. Interesting. Chapter 3 takes place in the subway, and introduces a new enemy type, the Gunner. It likes to shoot range attacks while hiding behind his energy shield, so you can't pick it off with return fire. So what ability do you think absorbing the Gunner will unlock? If you guessed its energy shield, then you need to play the lotto, like, right now. This ability isn't really that useful. You'd think it would be helpful to walk past the turrets that are ubiquitous in this chapter, but no, it doesn't absorb that much damage, and I think its network layout is too spread out to be really useful for most of the game. Unlocking the energy shield causes Guy to pass out again and wake up with more scales on his body, and he now has a permanent blade fixed to his arm. This is now the only melee weapon for the rest of the game, and it's pretty strong, but the horizontal swipes make it hard to break boxes for ammo and medkits. I guess it's not too bad as it keeps a kick from becoming irrelevant. This chapter is chock full of traps. Turrets, tripwire bombs, and ambush squads. If you take your time and shoot around corners like a really scuffed cover shooter, you can breeze past this section. There's a set piece here where Guy runs into a soldier in critical condition who still has enough life in him to cause microaggressions against Guy.
Подходи, гад, подходи. Приготовил я тебе сюрпризик.
Послушай, я только хочу добраться до госпиталя. Если хочешь, могу прихватить и для тебя лекарства.
Вот ты, сука! Думаешь, включил периметр и загнали нас в ловушку? Мы хорошо подготовились. Просто так вы нас не возьмете, проклятые насекомые.
A quick set piece ensues where you have to kill a few enemies, and despite Guy trying to play nice, Guy, the soldier isn't convinced by his persuasion check, and a set of persecutors detonate the tripwire that blows the door open for Guy to walk through. This is where the level falls apart for me. The game introduces these hard light gates that prevent Guy from progressing, but allow aliens to pass through unimpeded. There's a way to deactivate the gate, but it's on the other side. So how do we progress? There's a pit in the middle of the hallway with an energy biomass that's meant to draw the player's eye. While that's good, I didn't know that there was more to this pit than that biomass, and that I had to use alien vision to see in the dark, because I had gotten that ability so much earlier in the game that it wasn't even something I had considered when I stumbled around this part of the map. There's a new enemy type here that can't be absorbed, and it's more of a hazard than an actual enemy, because it's effectively a stationary turret that needs to be attacked. The game likes to place them behind hard light gates and force you to find ways around those gates while they're shooting at you. There's a part in this chapter where you have to disable 3 hard light gates, and the switches for the latter 2 are placed behind the gate. You can use your energy shield to redirect enemy fire towards the switches and activate them, or you can chuck a grenade over the gate and the blast will deactivate the switch. What's annoying is that you have to hunt down the location of the switches, which are obscured by the translucent effect of the hard light gates, and while under enemy fire. I looked up a guide to find out which side of the wall I had to post up to avoid shots and where to aim my grenades. Reaching the end of the hallway leads to a power station that Guy accesses like a biomass. Accessing the power station leads to a minigame that's visually similar to the network screen you would normally see when you access an ability in the menu. This is a really clever way of reinforcing the connection between the aliens and Guy's newfound abilities. I'm gonna call this mechanic gene hacking, and it's a recurring mechanic in the game. Later sections have really complex layouts, and you really gotta think through how to connect every node on the screen. It's a lot more engaging than I ever expected from this kind of game, and I like these segments. Hacking the power station opens up most of the remaining hard light gates for the rest of the section, with one less node to gene hack, and a chapter ends with Guy running through the train tunnel, with the aliens hot in his trail, and the soldiers heading him off at the pass. With no other way to go, Guy jumps into an adjacent tunnel, and makes his way onto an elevator towards the surface. Chapter 4 has Guy making his way towards a soldier base through blown-out apartment complexes and underground tunnels. This part of the game reminded me of Collapse of all things, with the destroyed apartments looking very similar to the derelict residential areas in Collapse. There's a part in the game that's full of toxic gas that requires you to use your energy shield to pass through, but your best bet is to hop across the area as fast as possible towards the nearby health biomasses and recover any health loss due to exposure from the fumes. There's another AA gun emplacement in this map, and a shooting gallery set piece ensues. I gotta say, MorphX has the best turret controls I've ever played in a Slavjank game. It's got much better recoil and control than the turrets in Infernal, and even feels better to use than the turrets in X2 Wolverine's Revenge. Enemies go down extremely fast from minigun fire, and a set piece doesn't outstay its welcome. What the hell was that? Well, it ran off before I could get a good look at it, but I bet we'll see more of it later. Reaching the front of the soldier's base, they don't plan on opening the door for Guy, but we got more pressing matters as another wave of aliens have come to storm the base. Seeing Guy take out the aliens himself is enough to earn the soldiers' trust, and they open the base up for him. One of the soldiers seems to know Guy and asks him about a lab, where they seem to have met, but Guy has video game amnesia, and can't remember anything that happened.
Мы же виделись в лабораториях на базе. И ты очень помог мне. Что произошло? Что с тобой случилось? Что с базой?
Я не знаю. Не помню, что со мной происходит. База, лаборатории. Проклятие. Сейчас мне просто нужны медикаменты, чтобы остановить мутации и рассеять туман в голове.
Вряд ли тебе помогут обычные лекарства. Обычно в таком состоянии мы встречаем уже не людей, одержимых только жаждой крови.
Просто дайте мне эти чертовы лекарства. Может быть, они хотя бы притупят боль.
Боюсь, ты опоздал. Пару часов назад тут такое началось. Похоже, твари взялись за нас всерьез.
So now we're friends with the military. I said it before, but I really love the choice of shots that this game uses for its cutscenes. I'm sure it's meant to be economic as it minimizes the use of reverse shot angles for talking heads, but having a wide open shot where both men are talking shop while a shooting match between the soldiers and a minigun-toting alien occurs in the background is so funny. I like this section of the game because it feels like a lot of the story is told through the environment art. The lab contains plenty of alien corpses, which suggests that the military have been experimenting on captured specimens to see what makes them tick. When Guy reaches a particular room, he passes out again, and a couple of soldiers watch over him as he recovers.
Ни хрена себе видок у него! Можешь пулю ему в башку, пока на нас не набросился.
Тихо ты! Семен сказал его не трогать. Он вроде как за нас.
Но тварь он действительно неплохо порвал.
Эй, ты, вставай! Тебе помощь нужна?
If Guy had any chance of resembling a human before, that went out the window with his latest form. The best way I could describe his look is if a Covenant grunt from Halo had a growth spurt. The two soldiers exist merely to get murked by a new enemy type, the Sparg. These are like upgraded versions of the Explorers. They sneak around while they're invisible, ambush you with quick melee kills, and then dip out of sight again and take potshots at you. They're easy to kill, but be careful around groups because they can take out a significant portion of health before you realize it. Just like how Guy has a fixed blade, he now has a fixed arm cannon that replaces his guns. It's got a slower rate of fire than the AK, but deals more damage, and if you ADS, the shots change into sniper shots that consume more ammo but deal more damage. You don't need to hunt for ammo anymore as the gun refills on cooldown, but guns are now in this weird state where they become props in the environment that you can't really use anymore. Guy can also generate his own bombs that consume the same ammo as an armed cannon, but can still go back to using regular frag grenades by scrolling with the mouse wheel. By now, Guy's abilities are locked in, and the rest of the game carries on without much to shake up the loop. Chapter 5 introduces the minigun-toting Terminator. This is the elite enemy unit of the game. Very chufty, high rate of fire from his range attack, and can swipe at you with a minigun to bat you away. He's not too bad if you approach him with rage mode, as you can recover any health he takes away with your melee attack. As far as I know, he can't die like the other enemies and needs to be finished off with a fatality. Yeah, MorphX has finishing moves where a guy will go into an animation to kill an enemy and absorb their corpse. Think of it as a protracted glory kill from Doom, because it allows Guy to instantly recover health from an enemy and keeps him immune from other attacks as the animation plays out. It kinda sucks that the Terminator's minigun dissolves with its corpse, but it's not very useful to Guy anyways, since he can't handle guns anymore. The end of this chapter requires pushing through a gauntlet of aliens down a wide avenue to face up against the second boss of the game, the Watcher. It's a large, boar-like enemy with a very simple pattern. It'll either charge a guy or shoot projectiles at him. You want to bait it into charging into a wall, which will cause it to go into a stun state, where you can focus on attacking its soft red underbelly. Ads will spawn in to distract you, but keep the Watcher as the main target and only attack the ads to soften them up for absorption, to recover any lost health during the fight. Turns out the Watcher was guarding the most important place of interest for the aliens, the incubator. This area is pretty touch and go for me. By now, we've seen all the stuff that MorphX has to offer. The hard light gates, all of the enemy types, the invisible head crabs that cordon off sections with their webbing. This level is a meat grinder that just so happens to be made of meat. Eventually, the chapter leads to the bottom of the level where Guy faces off against a network that's controlling the alien hive mind.
Ты меня удивляешь.
Что? Кто ты такой?
Чем это знание поможет тебе, особь? Теперь ты часть нашего города, нашего мира. Смирись с этим.
Как ты пробрался ко мне в голову?
Мы контролировали твои средства взаимодействия с внешним миром с самого момента побега из инкубатора. Когда ты аномально отключился от общей...
So I like this set piece, but I do have some mild criticisms for specific bits. The central unit is protected by a hard light shield that's powered by 3 power stations. We have to go to each power station and disable them in order to get to the central unit. But in order to disable the initial gates, we have to use alien vision to see which combination of switches we have to hit in order to open up any specific door. Thing is, each door requires 3 combinations, and each door only has 2 switches, so you'll have to activate the first switch, go to an adjacent door, activate the second switch, and return to the first door to activate the third switch. It's pretty tedious. Once you make it through the first door, you'll have to get to the power station and gene hack it, but each room is protected by various enemy units. Be smart and rush towards the power station as time freezes when you commence a gene hack. These are the longest hacking sections in the game, and I actually like the challenge they posed. I wish this chapter in general was a lot shorter because I would have loved to have done more of these puzzles and less of the same rote combat. Take breaks and save the game. Don't try to marathon this entire thing in one sitting like I did. When all 3 power stations are gone, you can kill the remaining Overseer and hack the central unit to end the chapter. Now we're seeing Guy's final form. He looks like the right-hand enemy from Resident Evil 4. His final ability is to dominate the will of a specific enemy and cause them to attack their own. I don't find it very useful, especially since it's such a late game power. Guy reaches the lab where everything started and remembers what actually happened to him. The scientists were working on a vaccine to fight back against the aliens who were using human bodies as genetic material to feed the swarm. Guy lost his entire family to an attack and offered himself as a test subject for the antidote, which would counteract the swarm's influence on the host body, but no one was sure whether the host would retain their memories or sense of self. Guy turned out to be the only successful test subject. Now all that was left was to stop the beast. So I'm mixed as to whether I like the final boss of the game. At this point, Guy is a powerhouse and can take down any alien threat that comes his way, but the beast is a chuftiest enemy in the entire game, as shown in his previous fight. The final boss arena consists of a 2-story platform where we have to run to the far end of the first story, activate a battery, run to the opposite end to climb the stairs, and activate the switch which triggers the adjacent gun turrets to shoot at the beast. It's the only way to deal any damage to the boss, and it's a very tedious affair. What compounds it is the fact that enemies are constantly spawning in to impede our progress. Ideally, you want to rush past everything in your way to activate both switches, but do take the time to kill a few enemies just to absorb their bodies for free health. This boss fight is more or less the Icon of Sin boss in Doom Eternal, but somehow even more rote. With the beast dead, Guy accepts his new identity and becomes a Doomslayer for aliens. The game ends somewhat ambiguously, but that's MorphX. I really like this game. Were there annoying parts of the campaign due to poor signposting and feedback? Yeah, but we're playing Slavjank, so we're grading on a curve. The controls in combat are solid, and I love the idea of seeing the protagonist slowly turn into a monster. It doesn't shy away from the concept, or try to make the hero look aesthetically pleasing the way a prototype still allows the thing that used to be Alex to still look like Alex. Way to commit to the bit, MorphX. I think I've played enough of these kinds of titles to create a ranking. I'll tell you that right now, MorphX is at the top of the Slavjank scale. Basic movement feels good, combat is serviceable, and the abilities really shine once you put enough work into them. Enemy encounters never felt too annoying. No death ever felt unfair. This is the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned. Underneath MorphX would be Collapse. Decent combat that can be circumvented if all you ever do is a do-si-do move I showed off in past videos, but it can get really shitty in the latter half of the game, and having a boss fight that requires learning all 4 combo moves sucked. However, Collapse does have better looking environments, and I remember more locales in that game, despite having a similar number of brown buildings everywhere. Third in the list of Slavjank would be El Matador. The game can be terribly off-putting if you don't figure out that shoot dodging is key to survival, and the final boss is an overpowered bastard. Nice looking environments like Collapse, but I had less time to appreciate them while playing. Fourth in the list is They're Alive. It's a rough, obtuse meat grinder of a game, but at least it was short. Fifth would be Devil's Hunt. This game spins its wheels for way too long, and its combat is objectively the worst in the lot, but the story and characters are just dumb enough to keep me entertained, and combat was pretty brain dead once you figured out which abilities to abuse. Last on the list is Infernal. In hindsight, Infernal's plot really wasn't that interesting. There was next to no character progression, and the abilities on offer sucked. Infernal's combat was the most frustrating because it was easy to get picked off by overwhelming odds, and absorbing bodies left you exposed to danger as you could still take damage and die while waiting for the animation to finish out. Please play MorphX. It's available on My Abandonware and worth at least one playthrough. Keep a video guide handy for the more confusing segments. Use a fan-made ISO provided by Keith Duffy, who again deserves nothing but praise for the work he put into making this game accessible for a Western audience. I think his blog is more or less inert at this point, but I'm pretty sure he'll still post an occasional Steam review. Thanks again, Mr. Duffy. You're an inspiration, and I hope you come back to cover more bad games.